The mind that remembers how to see itself. Buddhist wisdom. Right now, as we listen to these words, there is a voice running inside our heads. It might be commenting on what is being said. It might be agreeing, disagreeing, drifting off into something that happened earlier today. That voice has been with us for as long as we can remember. It narrates our lives. It judges, compares, worries, plans, regrets. And for our entire lives we have believed, without ever stopping to question it, that this voice is who we are. But consider this. That voice changes its mind constantly. It tells us one thing in the morning and the opposite at night. It is confident on a good day and full of doubt on a bad one. It says, "I love this person," and 3 hours later says, "I cannot stand them." If that voice were truly who we are, our deepest identity, it would not contradict itself so easily. It would not shift with every meal, every mood, every sleepless night. What kind of self changes its entire outlook based on whether or not it had coffee this morning? And yet we trust it completely. When it says, "You are not good enough," we believe it. When it says, "You need to worry about this," we worry. We did not choose these thoughts. We did not design our fears or our insecurities. They showed up uninvited, and we handed them the keys to our lives. But here is what we almost never notice. While the voice has been talking all this time, something else has been quietly present. Something that hears the voice without being the voice. We know the thoughts are happening, but that knowing is not itself a thought. It is something more still, more quiet. It does not comment. It does not argue. It is just there, aware. We can feel this right now. A thought appears in the mind, and we notice it. The thought is one event. The noticing is another. They are not the same thing. The thought has content, words, images, a story. The noticing has no content at all. It is simply the space in which the thought appeared. That quiet awareness has been here for every single thought we have ever had. Every fear, every joy, every doubt. They all arose inside something that was already aware. We just never looked at it, because we were too busy looking at the thoughts. There is something here deeper than thinking. Something that was present before the thought arrived and remains after the thought is gone. And once we begin to feel this, even faintly, a question opens up that changes everything. If we are not the voice in our heads, then what is this awareness that has been silently present all along? Can the mind actually turn around and look at itself? And if it can, how is that even possible? The Buddha had a very precise answer. And it starts with something we have fundamentally misunderstood about what the mind actually is. When we say "my mind," what do we picture? Most of us honestly imagine something like a container, a space inside the head where thoughts happen. There is a strong sense that the mind is one thing, solid, continuous, always there. It was there yesterday. It is here today. It will be there tomorrow. We might change our opinions, our moods, our beliefs, but the mind itself feels like the same mind throughout. This assumption is so natural that we never question it. But in the Abhidhamma, the Buddha's detailed analysis of mental experience, the mind is not described as a thing. It is described as a process. The Pali word is santana, a continuity, a stream. It is made up of countless individual mind moments, each one called a citta. Each citta arises, exists for the smallest flash, and passes away, immediately replaced by the next. There is no gap, just moment after moment, flowing so quickly that it creates the impression of something solid and permanent. The way a spinning point of light in darkness looks like a continuous circle, though only the moving point actually exists. This reframing changes everything about the paradox we started with. When we say, the mind is watching itself, we are not talking about a single entity trying to look at itself the way an eye tries to see its own pupil. We are talking about one mind moment arising and passing, and the next mind moment taking the previous one as its object. Each moment reflects what came before it. None of them is trying to reflect itself. And there is something else the Buddha observed, something that cuts to the very heart of the question, who is the observer? In the teaching on anatta, non-self, he pointed out, there is no fixed, permanent entity standing behind the stream. There is no little person sitting inside our heads watching a screen. When we say, I am watching my thoughts, the I we refer to is itself another thought, another moment in the stream. This might sound unsettling at first. If there is no permanent self, no me behind it all, then what are we? But consider what it would mean if there were a fixed, unchanging self trapped inside suffering. That suffering would also be fixed. There would be no exit. But if the mind is a stream where every moment is fresh and unbound from the one before it, then change is genuinely possible in any given instant. Freedom becomes possible because nothing was ever locked in place to begin with. So when we return to the question, what is it that knows? The answer becomes clear. In Pali, the word for consciousness is vijnana, which literally means to know clearly. The mind does not possess awareness as a separate ingredient. Knowing is the mind's very nature. Heat does not get added to fire from the outside. Heat is what fire is. In the same way, awareness is what mind is. Every single mind moment, however brief, is a moment of knowing. But here is where we need to be very precise, because this is the part most people either skip over or misunderstand. If every mind moment already knows, then what is the difference between being lost in anger and recognizing that we are angry? Both are mind moments. Both involve knowing. So what changes? What changes is what the mind moment knows. When we are lost in anger, the mind knows the object of anger, the person, the situation, the hurt. It knows outward. When we suddenly recognize I am angry, a new mind moment has arisen. And this one takes the previous mind moment itself as its object. It knows inward. The anger that was running the show a split second ago has now become something that is seen. And this new mind moment carries with it a specific mental factor, sati, which gives it the quality of holding that recognition steady, keeping it from slipping away immediately. So the knowing that observes the mind is not a different entity. It is a different moment of the same stream, one that happens to be directed at the stream itself rather than at the external world. And it is accompanied by sati, which is what gives that moment its distinctive quality of wakeful, non-reactive recognition. Without sati, the mind keeps knowing outward and never turns to see itself. With sati, the stream becomes transparent to itself. This is why the Buddha did not teach us to find the observer. He taught us to cultivate the conditions under which sati arises more often and stays longer. So sati is what allows the mind to turn and see itself. But if sati is a natural capacity, something built into the architecture of the mind, then why is it so often absent? Why do we spend most of our lives on autopilot, reacting without recognizing, feeling without seeing what we feel? We have all experienced how quickly sati vanishes. A moment of recognition, I am angry, flashes, and then the mind swallows us whole again. Sati needs certain conditions to arise: a degree of calm, a degree of wholesomeness in the mind, and strong emotion overwhelms exactly those conditions. So the very moments when we most need to see ourselves are the moments when seeing becomes hardest. What keeps it this way? In the Sabbasava Sutta, the Buddha identified something he called ayoniso manasikara, unwise attention. This is a particular way the untrained mind uses its own energy that actually generates more confusion. The sutta describes it specifically. The mind turns toward existential questions. Did I exist in the past? Will I exist in the future? What am I? How am I? This being, where did it come from, and where will it go? The Buddha did not say these are foolish questions. He said something more precise. These questions, when pursued by an untrained mind, do not lead to clarity. They lead to what he called a thicket of views, a desert of views, a twist of views, a tangle the mind cannot free itself from. Because every answer the mind produces to "Who am I?" is just another thought. And that thought will need another thought to examine it, and then another. The mind is not genuinely seeking understanding. It is seeking to confirm the sense of a solid self. And each time it tries, the tangle thickens. The Sabbasava Sutta goes on to list what this tangle actually produces. It describes 6 views that crystallize out of unwise attention. Among them, myself survives, myself does not survive. I perceive the self with the self. We may not use these exact words, but we all know the feeling. It is the voice that says, late at night, "Who am I really?" and then spirals into anxiety because no answer feels final. It is the restless search for identity. Am I my career, my relationships, my past, my beliefs? That never quite settles, because every answer we land on eventually shifts under our feet. The Buddha called this entire cycle a fetter, something that binds. And it binds precisely because the mind keeps feeding it with attention, mistaking the search itself for progress. But the Buddha also taught that there is another way to use attention: yoniso manasikara, wise attention. The Sabbasava Sutta makes the contrast explicit. Wise attention does not chase existential riddles. It turns toward what can actually be seen and verified. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the practice that leads to the cessation of suffering. The sutta states that when someone applies attention in this way, 3 fetters are abandoned: the view of a fixed self, doubt, and attachment to rituals and observances. This is the entry into the stream of awakening. What is striking about this teaching is the directness of it. The Buddha did not say, think deeply about suffering. He did not say, develop a theory about the nature of pain. Wise attention is not a more sophisticated form of philosophical reasoning. It is the willingness to meet experience as it actually presents itself, without adding layers of story, without needing to locate a self at the center of it. And this shift, from spinning in circles about who we are to simply seeing what is here, is the single most important turn a mind can make. Everything said so far, no matter how well it has been laid out, is still words. And words about awareness are not awareness itself. So now we come to the part that matters most, the practice. The Buddha used a very specific phrase when teaching mindfulness. He said, satam upatapetva, having established mindfulness. The word upatapetva does not mean to create. It means to establish, to make present, to set up. This distinction carries everything. We are not manufacturing something that does not exist. We are making room for something that has always been here, but keeps getting crowded out. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha laid out the practice with remarkable precision. The third foundation, Cittanupassana, observing the mind, uses language that deserves our full attention. The sutta says, "One understands mind with greed as mind with greed. One understands mind without greed as mind without greed. One understands mind with hate as mind with hate. One understands mind without hate as mind without hate." The word used here is pajanati, understands clearly. The Buddha did not ask us to analyze or interpret or judge what is happening in the mind. He asked us to understand it. And notice what the instruction includes. Not only the presence of greed or hate, but also their absence. This is significant. The practice is not only about catching ourselves when something unwholesome is happening. It is equally about recognizing the moments when the mind is clear, settled, free. We learn the texture of both states. We become familiar with the full landscape of our own inner life, not just the difficult parts. The sutta goes further. It lists states we might recognize: constricted mind and scattered mind, expansive mind and unexpansive mind, mind immersed in samadhi and mind not immersed, freed mind and unfreed mind. Each one met with the same response: understand it. No preference. No hierarchy in the moment of observation. The mind with greed is not met with shame. The mind without greed is not met with pride. Both are simply known. And in that knowing, a change takes place that no amount of thinking can produce. When greed arises and is understood as greed, it is no longer operating beneath our awareness. It has moved from being the force behind our actions to being something we can actually see. And what we can see, we are no longer enslaved by. This does not happen through willpower or self-control. It happens because clear understanding and blind reactivity simply cannot occupy the same mind moment. In the beginning, this will be clumsy. We will notice things using words. This is irritation. This is restlessness. That is knowing at the level of concepts, what the tradition calls paññatti, and there is nothing wrong with that. Mahasi Sayadaw, one of the most respected meditation teachers of the modern era, taught that conceptual noting is the doorway into direct experience. We begin where we are. Over time, as sati strengthens and the mind grows more settled, the knowing becomes less verbal and more immediate. We no longer think about anger. We see its arising the way we see a match strike. That shift is not forced. It ripens naturally when the conditions are right. The tradition calls this ripening vipassana jnana, the knowledge born of insight. It comes not because we are extraordinary, but because seeing is what the mind naturally does when it is no longer obstructed. The Satipatthana Sutta also contains a phrase that runs like a thread through every section of the practice. They meditate observing the mind as liable to originate, as liable to vanish. This is the vipassana dimension, not just noticing what is present, but seeing its nature directly. Everything that arises in the mind is liable to pass, not theoretically, not because a teacher said so, visibly, moment by moment, in our own immediate experience. The anger that felt so solid 2 minutes ago, gone. The craving that seemed like it would never end, gone. The calm that felt permanent, also gone. We are not told to believe in impermanence. We are invited to watch it happening in real time, inside our own minds, with our own attention. The paradox we started with, can the mind observe itself, was never really a paradox. It only seemed that way because we assumed the mind was something fixed and singular. Once we see it as a stream of moments, each one capable of knowing the one before it, the question dissolves. And what remains is not an answer. It is an experience. The experience of a mind that has always known how to see and has finally been given the quiet space to do so.